Defiance FM.
Where did I start then? Well, like most of us, I got interested in music as a teenager. Um, Late 80s was my teenage years. So a lot of funny enough, a lot of Manchester music, kind of pre Stone Roses, pre rave era, the Smiths, the Cure, stuff like the Cult, they were my kind of go-tos in my late teens. That's what I was really into. And then, rave music hit, the Manchester scene hit, um, a lot of kind of punk, post-punk stuff in the US hit. So I was into that for a couple of years. Um, I'm still into that, don't get me wrong. And then I probably had a pretty heavy few years of like straight up hip hop when I started DJing in my early 20s. So 90s hip hop stuff kind of took over my life for a few years. Um, so all of that was in Ireland. I grew up half in New York and half in Dublin, so I kind of had both of those influences going on. My old man was in New York, so I spent summers there. So there was that influence of music in New York City always. Um, Soul to Soul, some London stuff, Nina Cherry, that type of thing on the poppier end of things. Um, and yeah, and then I spent my 20s in Dublin, mostly till I was in my late 20s, and I was kind of I was a hip hop DJ in Dublin during those times and around Ireland, and I was kind of into a little bit of turntablism, but also into a lot of the more alternative versions. I don't like to use the word trip hop, but interesting instrumental hip hop stuff that could go anywhere from like DJ Crush and Shadow to like Luke Vibert and Square Pusher and things like that, while still having a pretty good interest in like electro and what was happening in Miami bass scene and what later became kind of new school breaks and whatnot. And that was all pretty interesting to me. So that went till my late 20s, which would have been around 2001. And then I moved to New York full time. I was there for about 7, 8 years. And when I got to New York, I was DJing a lot of hip hop clubs to earn a living, a lot of what was like called the lounge scene and whatnot back then. However, that's when I started in a band called The Glass, and we were signed to For Music in Germany. And so that was kind of starting to, it kind of revived my interest in songwriting. Um, I definitely was around a lot of a lot of the like electroclash scene back then. So Peaches and early LCD Sound System and DFA records and stuff. They were around the pubs and club scene, and Chick 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 and bands like that were around that scene. I liked a lot of that stuff. I don't know if I was playing a lot of it because I was getting paid to play hip hop at the time, but I was socializing a little bit in that scene. And my band was maybe a little bit kind of peripheral to that scene, The Glass. So I was starting to listen to a lot of my teenage stuff again, The Cure, The Cult, the songwriting, and that was having an influence on The Glass. Dominique, who was the singer in that band, was big into house music. He owned a place called Plant Bar in the Lower East Side in New York back then, which is where, Luke, the singer from The Rapture, worked. The sound system was made by James Burt Murphy by LCD Sound System. So I was aware of that scene and it was there. I don't know if I ever really felt part of it because I was still kind of interested in a lot of breaks and kind of post jungle stuff and electronic music. However, I was definitely looking at songwriting again, and that was part of what The Glass did, and I did that for about 10 years. All through this time, I was doing records under the name DJ Wool as well, which was, a project of mine that went on until a few years ago, really. And that was started out as kind of instrumental hip hop stuff in the 90s and ended up being a lot of like breaks and dance music and electronic music. And as The Glass were signed in Germany, we were touring there quite a bit, even though we lived in New York. So we were getting tours around Europe and France and places like that. This would be mid 2000s, 2003 to 2008 ish. And I started to kind of go to Berlin a lot, and I liked it there a lot. And I was kind of bummed out on New York. It was expensive and a hard place to get by as a musician. And I was working as an engineer a lot. I was, DJing in a lot of Irish pubs to make extra money and this and that. And I realized that through the glass and through doing DJ Wool remixes and records, I had a couple of years of gigs I could organize in Europe. So I ended up moving to Berlin from about you don't remember exactly, sometimes 2007 or 8 till about 2011. And that was a kind of productive period for me for that DJ Wool name. I was releasing on, it's gone now, but what was Disco Bell Records. The labels in Finland, which are now called My Techno Weighs a Ton, but back then, I forget. I have a hard time remembering the name of all the labels I've worked with, but their label right now is My Techno Weighs a Ton, which is a big kind of like dance music label. So I was doing a lot of that and remixing and playing a lot in Germany and around Europe from 2000 maybe I don't know, 6, 7 to about 2011. Yeah. All the time I had been an engineer during all these years. So like when I was in Ireland, when I was DJing, I had, my own studio set up, and I worked for a lot of bands and different things like that, and kind of learned that end of the trade a little bit back then. So, around 2011, I'd been DJing for 20 years, and I was kind of a little burnt out, and I had an opportunity to go and engineer for the Stagehands Union in San Francisco and kind of take a break from DJing. I was, mid 30s, and I was like, all right, in a relationship, about to get married. My wife, then girlfriend, she got pregnant, and we moved to California, and I got into the Stagehands Union, and I was like, okay, my music career is over. I'm just going to be an engineer. But we all know that never happens when you say you're going to do it. So within a couple of years, while I was working, I had released a record on Dither Down, a DJ Wool album in New York, did some live shows I started to get into modular synths and outboard gear a lot by then. You can't really see my room, but the rigs are all set up in here.
Oh wow.
And okay, get a little peek at a couple of modules there on my right side. you know, I'm trying to get, I'm 50 years old, so it's a 30-year rundown I'm giving you pretty much. So I'll speed it up. But around that time, I had done a couple of remixes for a band called Jet Lag that Andy Rourke from the Smiths was in, and he had remixed some DJ Wool stuff. And at the time, he was writing. This would have been 2014 or 15, I think. He was making an album with Dolores from the rock band The Cranberries. So I ended up engineering and mixing that album, which kind of ended up with me on tour with The Cranberries. And that's how I ended up moving back to Ireland. I was pretty burnt out from working again as an engineer for quite a few years in California. My wife's from California. Neither of us were enjoying Trumpism because that was around the time that Trump was getting elected. And so we lived through that election campaign, and my wife, who's American, was like, yeah, well, let's just move to Europe again. And so I had that opportunity to tour with the Cranberries and ended up moving back here to Ireland, where I kind of, which is familiar to me. I'd spent a lot of my childhood in my 20s here. So my mom lives here. And so it was kind of nice to come home after 20 years because I hadn't spent a lot of time here in the interim period from when I had been a kind of, I don't want to say the word well known, but a busy DJ in Ireland in the 90s. And so, yeah, I'd had a career in the meantime. So we came back here, and that's when I kind of decided I messed around with some stuff. I did some more DJ Wool records. I did a bunch of remixes and things like that. And then it just, I'd always been writing. So that's when I started writing what became Def Nettle, which is what I pretty much focus on all the time now. However, I am working on a couple of hip hop albums at the moment for some people in New York, but I can't talk about it just yet because we're right in the middle of it. So I'm also doing that as well. So yeah, there's a quick rundown.
I mean, it's a hell of a CV.
Thanks. I always like to think that like yeah, no, I'm really happy that I've been able to work in music for a long time um and be around people who are far greater than me, um and to be able to still get up every day and go into the studio it's a privilege, man. It's really nice. It's a good thing. And you know uh, yeah, to have some interest in what I'm doing as Def Nettle. I mean, we haven't like blown up or anything, and I don't even know if I'm searching for that, but I'm definitely getting to express myself the way I want with it and to use my vocal again, which I really hadn't fronted a band since I was in college in the early 90s. So it's just nice to get back to that. Pretty surprising for some people, apparently. But, for me, it just seemed like a natural thing to do because I've always written a lot. And I hadn't done much with my writing in a long time. So it was a really nice way to channel that. And I'm comfortable enough in Ireland. Some people know me for what I've done in the past, some don't. And yeah, I've done a lot, but I still fly a little bit under the radar. And maybe that's the secret to having a music career that lasts. What goes up must come down. Sometimes um, all music careers have ebbs and flows, peaks and troughs, but I guess now I'm trying to just flatline it and enjoy it and feel pretty privileged to be 50 years old and making records, and some people are listening. So yeah,
I think
that's
it's a good antidote to this kind of culture that you get now of we've just got to make a 30-second clip that goes viral on TikTok, and then then all our problems will be solved.
yeah. Even
Whereas
if
someone like
you
you who's spent what 30 years just really grafting away, using your talents in different ways. You've been DJing, engineering, songwriting, touring,
yeah.
and it's given you a sustainable, enjoyable career.
Yeah, I won't lie. There's been some great highs and great lows during it, and there's been easy times and tough times. But like I was saying before, every time I think I'm going to quit, something happens, and so I've kind of got to the point now where I'm like, all right, I'll just keep working. You know, we all have hopes and dreams still, but I think like now for me, they're just tempered with for want of a better word, kind of gratitude with um, being able to continue, and having support of friends and peers. And it's interesting. I did an interview about our recent single. We released a single like a week ago, and I did an interview during the week, and it was someone from my peer group who I'd worked with in the 90s, or we knew each other, and they were very critical. They were like, so what's it like, being this age and doing that? Don't you feel a bit, uncomfortable, or where do you get off kind of attitude he had with me?
Mm.
And it was interesting because there was someone else in the interview who's a lot younger than me, who's an amazing musician in Ireland. And he said to the interviewer, he's like, oh, that's kind of an unfair question because for us, it's really nice to hang out with Glenn because he kind of can show us what's possible or something. And I thought that was really nice of that person and generous. And it occurred to me that the only people who ever criticize me for my age are people who are my age or older. And like any critique that's negative in life, not just in music, it's usually a reflection of the person making the critique. And I think that's particularly true in music because musicians are so emotional and so involved. And I know I was probably like that when I was younger. So not necessarily critical of other people because I always knew there was stuff to be gleaned. But I was probably aggressive, but more so than now. But um, I've it's been really cool to like have support of a younger group of people, even if the people my age are kind of skeptical. The younger people don't give a fuck. They don't even notice, well, maybe they do, they don't tell me, but that's where a lot of the support is. And that's really surprising and really awesome, and I'm really appreciative of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the kids are all right.
the kids are all right. Yeah, I think like maybe their parents are all right to them or something, and the kids, yeah, they're not as critical. Times aren't as dark as they were in Ireland in the 90s. Well, actually, that's maybe not true. Maybe they're more dark in another sense, but we're not as isolated as we were back then. There, in the 90s, there was no internet. So if I wanted someone in Manchester to hear my record, I had to get that vinyl had to be pressed, 6 months in advance, and that had to be in shops in Manchester. It had to be in shops in Leeds and Glasgow and fucking Newcastle and Bath and all these places around England. So that was a dance back then. So it was a different type of situation when you were releasing records, and you had to call up shops, call up distributors. You had to make relationships and friends with people, and communicate what you were trying to say musically in order for them to even entertain a conversation. And it was difficult because the UK is such an important music scene globally, maybe even more so back then, because there wasn't an internet. There were magazines, and the English speaking ones came from London, and some from Manchester as well. Bugged Out was in Manchester. I wonder, do they still run a club called Bugged Out in Manchester? I know a couple of the DJs from that, James Holroyd and whatnot. They still support the Chemical Brothers on tour. But I came over and played Sankey's. That was a big club in Manchester back then.
Oh yeah. That's got that iconic status.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still there, but I played Sankey's a couple of times back then, because I had supported the Chemical Brothers in Dublin a few times. So I knew Tom and Ed back then, but I haven't crossed paths with them in 20 years. So yeah, good people, really good people. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's nice that you've obviously built this community of musicians who you've met along your career, and maybe some of them you're still in touch with. Some of them, sadly, like Andy Rourke, maybe have moved on. But
yeah, Andy and Dolores, yeah, are gone. Yeah, you get to that age where for me, Def Nettle, the band, was catalyzed by becoming sober. So I wasn't releasing my writing in any way when I wasn't sober, and I got sober about 5 years ago. I decided to go clean and all that business, and I think that was that was caused by seeing people of my own peer group not able to get sober, and maybe not being able to continue as musicians, and not being able to hold it together, and getting into tight spots. And I have a family, and I wanted to keep my shit together, so I got sober, and that's when Def Nettle started, funnily enough. It's and once I couldn't even imagine doing it live when I started writing the songs, but once I started imagining doing it live, I don't think it would be believable if I did it if I wasn't sober. So being sober is a necessary element to do this whole band. So I think you do reach a point in your music career where that stuff gets in the way, and it has done for a lot of people. Yeah.
So did you feel like you had to be in the right frame of mind to be able to, I mean, first of all, to write the songs, but then also to perform them?
Absolutely. Right now, like if I were to get drunk and perform it, it would look like shit. It wouldn't even be believable, because all of the songs are it's realism, There's not a lot of like surrealism in the Def Nettle songs. They're all stories of my life, people in my life, situations in my life, and I feel like it's hard to present that to an audience anyway. And I think the only way I can do it convincingly is by doing it for real, like telling the story without putting a wall between me and who I'm communicating it to. So absolutely, yeah, it's actually the best thing about it. I love that point, that part of my life now. It's really cool to be sober. And we were talking about that interview that I had the other day, and afterwards the guy who was interviewing was like, "Oh, let's go for a pint," and the younger guy was like, "Yeah, I'll go with you, but Glenn doesn't drink." And the interviewer was like, "Glenn doesn't drink," because he just knew me 20 years ago when I was like party boy, and the younger crowd don't know me that way. So they know me as a guy who doesn't drink at all. So um, so somehow that's working, and definitely I'm live. It's almost like walking into the fire with your eyes open, like embracing it, you know what I mean? And there's something really like if you do that, then you get extra courage from it. You get extra like vibes or something from the universe when you like decide you're going to face your fears full on. Maybe that's true in all walks of life, but it definitely is in performance of music.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because if the audience like you know that it's you that they like, not a drunk version of you that might be loud and boisterous and
You just described me when I'm drunk. I already talk a lot, as you can tell, but yeah, I got sick of that version of myself, and it certainly isn't something I want to present to an audience at this point in my life, and I don't want to present it to myself. So, um, yeah, it's really important that the lyrics are presented by me and not a version of me, um, in order to be, like I said, convincing. I think if I was drunk, people would be like, that's fucking stupid. Whereas because I'm sober, it's so intense, it's so real that all the fears I have of people like not liking it or being critical of it, they're not real because I don't give a shit if they like it or not because it's real. So it doesn't matter if they like it or not. But I don't get those reactions when I'm sober. When I was drunk, I probably would. But I don't get those negative reactions that I would have got when I was drunk, and so it's the proof is in the pudding there.
it's an easy trap for. I've seen a lot of younger bands fall into it. They think like, a gig's not a gig unless you drink 6 pints of lager right before you go on stage, and it's
Yeah,
there's a place for it. I get that it's fun.
there is. Yeah, there absolutely is, and and you know, if you're really good and you know what you're doing and you know how to do your songs in that condition, it can be really good fun, and it can be really good fun for the audience. And I don't have any critique of anybody else doing that. I'm not out to, you know, wreck anybody else's buzz. Like, go for it, man. I'll enjoy your show if you're enjoying it.
Mm.
And sometimes like with live music, being on the edge of it falling apart can be really exciting too. Watching a band that's close to the edge can be amazing. So I think for me, I hang on that balance sober now, but I certainly don't have any misgivings about other people doing it, as long as it's not a fucking shit show, as long as it's not just crap because of it. And I'm definitely guilty of having done some crap shows because I was off my face. Not in a long, long time, but there were some times. And I definitely don't want to go back there. No.
You
No.
know,
Yeah, yeah. I like being in my own mind, and I've learned how to have a good time in a club or a live venue sober, and that's really valuable to me. I really, really enjoy going to see music now. Maybe more than I ever did when I was drunk. I socialize better, and I didn't think I could when I was a drinker, and now I've figured that out. I've worked out that puzzle, and it's super cool. So it's very valuable, and I I work a lot in the studio, and various other things in my life. So I like to get up early and get shit done too.
yeah, that feeling at the weekend when you can actually get out of bed at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning and think, oh, I can actually face the day ahead of me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I went to a birthday party maybe summer before last, a couple of years ago, and it was with a crowd of people that I usually used to party with years ago. And we're staying at a hotel. I got up the next morning to drive, to the airport or wherever it was. It was a couple hours away. And I woke at like 7 in the morning, and I like packed my shit and got in the car and left. And I was like an hour down the motorway when I realized, oh, I'm not hungover. I have nothing. I didn't say any stupid shit. I'm like running away from. That's when I realized that was my moment of like, oh, okay, I'm sober now. I didn't even need to get up and run away. Whereas a couple of years ago, I would have been like, oh my God, get me the fuck out of here. What did I do last night? And now I was almost instinctively doing that. Yeah, there's a song about that coming somewhere. There's a
I
few
look forward to
lyrics
that.
written. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
So you released the first Def Nettle single in, was it 2022? It was only last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It was called The Pills, and that came out I think February 2022. And then a couple months later, we did War Machine with Andy Rourke from Smiths, and then we
I
did
was gonna say, I love the
Architecture.
bass on that.
Yeah, it sounds like Andy, all right. I used to slag him, because he would on another record we were working on, he would always come in and be like, "I don't want this to sound like the Smiths." And then we'd make the record, and then at the mix stage, he'd be like, "It doesn't really sound like one of my bass lines." And I'd be like, "Well, you told me not to." And then we'd end up making it sound a bit more like the Smiths. So, yeah, he was a amazing musician and an interesting character, and um, I had some pretty cool experiences with him. As I said, the Smiths were a big part of my teenage years. And the first time I met him, I was on tour with that band, The Glass, in the early to mid 2000s that we were playing in San Francisco, an indie club there. I forget what it was called. It was kind of the real West Coast indie club, but pop. I think it was Pop Scene was the name of the club, and it was it was a great place to go and play in California at the time. And he was DJing the event and we were playing live, and I hadn't met him before, and I was a bit like, oh cool, I get to meet someone from the Smiths. And in the middle of my set he just came on stage and started dancing with us. And that we found out we lived near each other in New York, so we ended up partying and hanging out a bit. And so it was nice to make several different records and remixes with him, and then to eventually do the album with him, he and Dolores. And so yeah. So that was War Machine. That was the second release. Then we did a third one last November called Architecture. And then so we've had like 5 or 6 singles out in that year. And now we have an album finished. Up to this point, it's been me writing the songs a lot. I play all the parts, but I'm not the greatest guitarist, not the greatest bass player. So now I have a full live band that play permanently with me, and they've played maybe quite a bit of the album now too. But I had the album started before they all came on board, and there were a couple of different versions of the live act as we started. So we got Eli Siegel plays bass, Ronnie Carroll plays guitar. I got Lisa does the other vocals, and we got Damian Fox plays drums. So each of those play on the album at different parts. Eli probably plays more than anyone. He's on about 5 songs, but a lot of the other parts of the album were played by musician friends of mine around the world. There was some of it was made during COVID, and I have a lot of musician friends. So if I play a guitar part and I want somebody who's way better than me on guitar in the recording, I'll send it out. So Invisible was the next single after that, and that was the first time that the full band just played it. So that was pretty cool. That was a nice change.
Or just live tracked it right there in the room.
No, I think I recorded the bass and vocals to a drum machine first, and then the live drums came on, or something like that. Or maybe we had done some guitar first with the vocals, so it was patched together. They all played on it basically, but it wasn't done like that traditionally, unfortunately. But now that's what I'm kind of getting to. I'm getting to a point where we'll be able to just go in as a band and record. But being me, I'm pretty productive, and we're just getting permanent now, really, the live band, even though we've done a few shows. So I'm hoping for, the album's more of a mishmash, even though they're all on it at places. There's still mostly songs that I wrote here in the studio.
What's the writing process like for a band like Def Nettle? Is it very kind of, you have an image of how you want the song to sound and you're bringing in these different musicians to achieve that sound? Or do you just give them a rough structure to play around in and say, off you go, let's see what you can come up with?
I have a fairly good idea of what I want the band to sound like. However, I'm really open to what anybody brings to the table. Ultimately, like, my voice is on all the songs, and all the songs start with either a bass, a guitar, and a drum pattern that I've made. So more or less. So there's they're embellishing what I've done. You know, it would be nice now. You know, we're just getting the first album out, so it seems a bit redundant to talk about another album. But I already have lyrics for 7 or 8 tracks I'm working on for the next one. So I'm hoping to make it a bit more of a traditional approach on the second one. But I don't like to make a plan because I might just end up making a great track here in the studio on my own and being like, all right, well, this is good. So, but at the same time, I do want to include everybody who's in the band because they put so much effort. They're all great musicians and they put so much effort into rehearsals and everything like that. And so I don't want to like hoard the publishing to myself or anything like that. And I'm too old for that. I'm happy to spread it out and be fair with it. That's what I try to do. And but process wise, I think I do write the lyrics separate to the music. So maybe 7 out of 10 times I'll be writing lyrics in the car, down at the beach, at the kitchen table. You know, I have an acoustic guitar. I have a lot of synthesizers and drum machines up here. And the irony is I write a lot of the stuff at my kitchen table with an acoustic guitar. But, the lyrics I'll have and maybe an idea of a couple of chord changes or something. But I like to have the concept of the song, you know? I don't like to try to write into the music, you know. I'll have the lyrical concept of the song kind of. I mightn't have written all the verses or even the chorus, but take for example the song War Machine that I did with Andy. I wrote that on the way back from dropping a friend of mine to rehab, you know. So it was about my friend, you know. I pulled in and all the lyrics just came out, and I came home and I don't even think I had a beat, and I started from there with that one. I think I started with guitar and those lyrics. So a lot of them start like that, like an idea I have when I'm somewhere else. I live in the countryside, so I often have to drive to the city, which is, you know, without traffic, it's an hour and 10 minutes away, but with traffic, it can be 2 hours. And that's when I tend to get my ideas. So I'll have a little recorder on the phone or whatever, and I'll put down the lyrics that way and then transcribe them when I get home.
That's a nice way of working.
Yeah, and musical ideas, like I'm always pricking around with a guitar or a synth or a modular synth or a drum machine. I'm always like, I'll come in and just start playing around. If I see something I like, I'll see if any of those lyrics kind of work with it, you know? Yeah, and go from there. Yeah.
And as far as gigs are concerned, have you got much planned for next year, or I guess for the rest of this year as well?
Yeah, we're doing today's Friday, so a week from tonight we're playing at Fibber McGee's, which is kind of the old school punk rock bar of Dublin. I used to go there 30 years ago, so that's pretty interesting for me to go back to somewhere I've only been. I went a couple of weeks ago and I hadn't been in 20 years, so that's really exciting for me to go in and play somewhere, which is kind of where I started, to go back to that. Really awesome. And then we're doing an album launch at a place called Whelan's, which is kind of the premier kind of smallish live venue in Dublin, where everyone passes through. You know, every band on the way gets through Whelan's. So we're doing our launch there February 8th. Yeah, so the album's out February 9th and our launch is there February 8th. So I'm focused on those 2 shows right now, making sure they're good.
Cool.
A lot of my effort in the last few weeks has gone to getting the album mixed and mastered and doing rehearsals. And I do all the artwork, all of that in-house. We're getting vinyl pressed. You know, I work with a couple of PR companies, one here and one in Germany. So, you know, I do all of that end of running the band myself. Nobody helps me with that. So it's a lot more work than some people think. It's a lot of work. Yeah.
And do you do all the production yourself?
Yeah.
When it comes to mixing and mastering and so on.
Yes, I do. But on the final mixes, I sometimes pass them out to a couple of different people to get an extra ear. A guy called Darren Nolan, who mixes a lot of Irish bands, has done the mix on maybe 4 or 5 of the 10 tracks on the album. and then yeah, I actually mastered it myself, which is probably a no-no for a lot of people, but I know what I'm doing. And yeah, so I mastered the album myself. Yeah, yeah, digitally, which I was in two minds about that. I had gotten some analog masters done, and I liked them. They were great. But on the overall album, I was preferring what I was doing, and that's no disrespect to anybody else that was working on it. It's just I also didn't want it to be too. I wanted to keep it a little grimy. For this one, yeah, the way it was pieced together at my space and all that, I kind of wanted to keep control over it. Yeah, but I've been mixing records for a long time, so I have the gear, and yeah.
I guess because a lot of music can sound too polished nowadays. Nice to bring back some of that grit.
Yeah, it's a fine line between, music these days is as loud as it's going to get ever. There's only so far in the loudness wars you can go. So I probably could have made it 5% louder than I did, and I decided not to. And I'm really glad I did that, because I've kept some dynamic in the mixes and in the mastering. I know it's not the trendiest thing to do, and it might not work so well for me comparatively speaking, but if we as a culture have gone as high in volume as we can go, there's only one place to go, and that's back down a little bit. I always credit the first Arctic Monkeys album as being the album that made everything too fucking loud. And after that, it was a war. It was a great album, but after that, it was just a war of loudness. And I like a little dynamic. I like when it gets softer. I don't need to be blown away by a banger. Even if my song's a banger, even if the song is a banger, I don't need it to blow my ears away for me to really like it. And it's taken me a while to get back to that mentality, because I'm an engineer, I'm a musician, and I'm around music. So I've gotten used to those loud mixes myself, and when someone sends me something and it's not quite as loud, I'm like, oh, that's not quite loud. So I've had to reteach myself to accept something when it's got some more dynamic.
And sometimes that silence or those quiet moments, they're the ones that kind of pull you in. You're exactly. Like, oh, what's happening now? Where's all that noise gone?
Absolutely. And that, yeah, dynamic range has a lot to do with emotional range as well, because our emotions aren't always up all the time, and music is emotional. So I like to think that I don't go for that so much, and it's a money thing. In a more perfect world, it would be nice to be able to afford to go into a big analog mixing and mastering suite and get things done over a few weeks and sit on a nice couch and drink tea. But that's just not possible with the way music is made right now. And that's okay, because I've done that, and it hasn't always had the best results. So I'm happy with how it sounds. Yeah, I'm stoked.
Looking forward to hearing the full album.
Thank you. Thanks. I'll make sure you get it. I'll send you after this interview.
Please do.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for doing this.
Cool. Thanks. You're very welcome, man. We'll stay in touch, and I appreciate you getting in touch with me. Well, this can be outside the edit, but how did you find out about Def Nettle? I'm just interested.
I have a system now, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to widen the net and speak to artists from all over the world. So what I tend to do is I tend to pick a country, pick a genre, and then just dive in. So like it might be like Danish jazz.
Gotcha.
Or it might be like American grunge. Right. And then I just search, and then I just kind of see like which names are popping up continuously.
Okay. All right.
I've got a few rules, like they have to be releasing music, or they have to be active, or they have to have had, an interesting life story. Preferably a combination of all of those.
Cool, yeah. Oh,
and
that's
then I just drop them a message.
Oh, well done, man. Fair play. That's awesome. It's nice that someone's doing that. Thank you.
It's fun.
Oh, it's brilliant. I appreciate it.